Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
The staff has done it again here at America at Night. Put together a pretty good show. Let's just make sure I don't mess it up. Coming up, hour number 3, of course, phone calls and text messages and all that, just like every single night. Hour number 2, looking forward to this. Have you ever heard of a man named Bennett Cerf? Bennett Cerf was a mid-century gadfly. He was a panelist on What's My Line. He wrote joke books. He also was the man who started Random House. It's a fascinating story. There's a new book called Nothing Random, the story of the beginnings of Random House and Bennett Cerf. We'll talk about that in hour number 2. Hour number 1, we're going to talk about gas prices and natural gas and what the bombings in Iran are doing to natural gas and the Strait of Hormuz and everything else. This first half of the first hour, though, we keep reading that there are Tomahawk cruise missile shortages and that there are interceptor shortages with the United States. And so we're going to talk to a man who knows quite a bit about this. Colonel Mark Cancian is a senior advisor with the CSIS International Security Program Expertise. Colonel, welcome to America at Night.
Thanks for having me on the show.
We keep reading about all of this. How worried are you, and how much of this is chicken little and the sky is falling?
Well, it's something that I have to be concerned about, but I'm not all that worried at this point. But let me go back to the beginning of the story, which is that concerns about inventories, particularly of munitions, have been around for the last couple of years. There were a series of war games that CSIS ran that showed that in a U.S.-China conflict in the Western Pacific, we'd run out of some munitions very quickly, and at the end of a month, we'd run out of a lot of munitions, and that generated a lot of interest. And the Pentagon, to credit, has been ramping up its production of munitions, though it takes years to refill the bins. And then on the current conflict in Iran, no one was thinking about that at the very beginning because we were hearing that the conflict might go on for a couple of days. But then when the president's talking about 4 weeks, then people started thinking a lot about munitions and, could we keep up the pace of operations? And let me...
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, and I think there are 2 areas to look at when you're thinking about munitions. One is the offensive, that is attacking ground targets, and the other is the defensive, protecting ourselves and our allies and partners against Iranian missiles and drones.
Okay, one quick side question. How much of our arming Ukraine has led to the stockpile depletion of some of these munitions?
Some. And the reason I say just some is that Ukraine has been mostly a ground combat, and there doesn't appear to be any prospect for ground combat in Iran. Now, air defense is a place where the United States has given them a lot of munitions, and that is one place where we need them here. So for things particularly like Patriot missiles, which intercept ballistic missiles, of which Iran has a lot, and Russia for that matter, that's one place where the trade-offs have been very difficult. There were some discussions last summer, do we give Patriots to Ukraine? Do we hold them back for ourselves? That's a place where, I say that the trade-offs between the theaters and which risks you want to accept become difficult.
Let's talk about those offensive versus defensive. The Tomahawk cruise missile, offensive, dare to say?
Absolutely.
Okay. How are we doing with that stockpile?
The Tomahawks, we're doing okay. We did some calculations and figured that the United States had about 1,100 that we could spare after we filled all of the ships with Tomahawks. And we fired off a couple of hundred. We don't build all that many. I think this year we're only building like 60. And if the war had gone on as it was going on, that would have been a real. The fortunate thing for us is that we have gained air superiority. General Kane talked about that the other day in his press briefing. And what that means is that we can fly over Iran at minimal risk, not zero risk, but minimal risk. And that means we're putting aircraft over Iran, and they can approach to their targets very, very closely. And to give you a sense of the difference this makes for the munitions, a Tomahawk costs about $4 million each. But we can now, because we can overfly the targets, use what's called a JDAM. That's basically just a bomb with a guidance kit on the front. That costs about $70,000. So the fact that we can now overfly means that we can use much less expensive munitions, and therefore we don't have to rely on the Tomahawks and similar munitions like JASM.
Those JDAMs are pretty easy to make too, right? I mean, that assembly line is actually pretty easy, is it not?
It is, and we buy a lot of them. We have a large inventory. I think now we're buying about 5,000 a year, but in the past we've cranked that up to 20,000. So that's really been our bread and butter air-to-ground munition during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and even now, as long as we can overfly.
Yeah, that's Boeing, is it not? Those JDAMs?
You got me on that one.
Oh, okay. I think it's if memory serves me right, it's a Boeing. But anyway,
it is.
I want to talk.
It is Boeing. I'm looking at it on my computer.
Okay,
right.
Good. All right. Once in a blue moon, I'm right. Okay. Let's talk about the interceptors, because that's the defensive side of it. And it seems like Iran has an unlimited supply of drones, if you're reading the stories correctly. And the interceptors, you use 2 or 3 interceptors per drone. Take me through that scenario.
Yeah, Iran is firing basically 2 kinds of munitions. One are the drones. These are very often referred to as the Shaheeds, which are very cheap drones. They have a triangular wing. I think people have seen examples of those in videos. They also gave a lot to Russia, and they've been used very extensively in the Ukraine war, and they're very inexpensive. But they're also firing ballistic missiles, and those are much more expensive, but they're also much harder to intercept, and they carry a much bigger bang. So, the kinds of systems we need to protect against the Shaheeds, which are basically like Cessna airplanes, they'll fly about as fast. And what we need against a missile that's flying through the air at high rate of speed, you need 2 different systems. And it's on the latter one where we're using the Patriots.
Okay, so I have read in numerous different publications that at this current clip, it's not going to be too long before we run out of these high-end interceptors.
And that's certainly a risk. We have about 2,000 Patriots, and we minus whatever we fired off in the last 3 days. So we have a fair number still to go, but there are 2 problems. The first one is that the war planners in the Pentagon will want to hold some back in case there's a conflict someplace else in the world, for example, in the Western Pacific against China. And they will be arguing that, if you go down too far, then you're taking a lot of risk in the Western Pacific. Now, it's entirely up to President Trump how much risk he wants to take. And if he decides that he's willing to use them all here and, take the risk that, we'll have, a gap in the Western Pacific, he could do that. But I think you'll see that argued in the public if we get to that point. Now, we may not quite get to that point because the Israelis are going after the Iranian missiles very aggressively, and they're going after both the launchers and the missile storage sites to try to eliminate the missiles before they even get fired. And if they have success with that, then the number of Patriots we need to fire will go down. But that is, I think, something that everyone is watching very closely, because if we run out of Patriots, or you have to take that risk in the Western Pacific, then, I'd say the planners and the strategists will get very worried.
I wouldn't put anything past Israel. They're able to explode those pagers, and they were able to hack into the traffic cameras in Tehran to sort of follow the leaders. So they've got some pretty good intelligence. But there's a lot of mountainous regions in Iran. Are they going to be able to find these needles in a haystack?
I don't have a good answer to that. On the one hand, when the United States did this 40 years ago in Desert Storm, it was very difficult. We spent hundreds and hundreds of aircraft sorties looking for Scud launchers, and we never found any. And we blew up a lot of things we thought were Scud launchers. After the war, we realized that we hadn't really hit any, zero. But it's 40 years later, and intelligence methods are much better. And, the Israelis, seem to have almost a magical ability to find things in Iran and, get things done. One of my colleagues said that if the Israelis told him that they could part the Red Sea again, he'd believe them. The things they've done are, so extraordinary.
Yeah. Mark Cancian is with us, Colonel, United States Marine Corps, Senior Advisor, CSIC International. What is the Winchester threshold?
That's a great question, and it depends on President Trump's willingness to accept risk in the Pacific. The war planners, I'm sure, have a threshold. I don't know what that is. If we have 2,000, is it 1,000? I don't know. But I say it comes back to how much risk is Trump willing to accept.
In other words, how much is he willing to deplete the arsenal?
That's right, and have a gap in capabilities if something were to happen with China. Now, we can refill the gap. It would take, several years to do that. The problem is that Patriots are in great demand. Half the production goes to allies and partners, and that's actually been a good thing because many of the missiles, I think over half, that have been fired in the Gulf have been fired by our allies and partners who had bought Patriots from us. So, that has paid off, but it means it's a little harder to rebuild our inventories. Now, to give the Pentagon credit, they're expanding the production of Patriots and a wide variety of other munitions, and are getting up there, but it just takes a long time. You have to.
Yeah, Colonel. Colonel, I have about a minute left. I want to ask you about Iran. Seems like they have an unlimited supply of drones. How are they able to manufacture and produce so many drones over the years?
Yeah, it's because they're cheap and simple. These things cost, it's estimated between $20,000 and $40,000. They are made as cheaply as you can imagine, and because it's a one-way flight, and they have a small engine. I say they look like a Cessna. They program in a location on GPS, and off it goes, and that's all it does. It just goes to that location and then tries to dive on it. Now, because it's slow and easily seen, most of them are shot down. The Arab countries are claiming 90%, and that's not incredible. The Ukrainians have done that well at times. But, if the Iranians fire 700, you shoot down 90%, that still means that 70 get through. The warhead isn't that big. I think it's sort of 20, 30 pounds. It still makes a bang. So, they are scrambling to try to, shoot down more, but it's hard because, there are always some that get through.
And that's where we are. That's where we'll leave it. Mark Cancian, who was with us, he is a colonel, Marine, retired, senior advisor, CSIS, International Security Program Expertise. Colonel, thank you for joining us. I know it is a very busy time for you. You're being pulled in a lot of different directions. Thank you for your insight. Have a good and safe night.
Thanks for having me on the show.
You got it. Mark Cancian, who is a senior advisor and Wells all about, knows everything there is to know about munitions and stockpiles and everything else. Some keen insights and some interesting comments from him. Stay right there. We're just getting started. We'll talk about gas, the Strait of Hormuz, natural gas, as well as gasoline for your car and for the economy, but natural gas as well. Big story about that. What's the latest and what's the future hold for all of that? Stay right there. We're just getting started. America at Night, back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven, where the nation comes to talk. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, there's a lot of talk about the War Powers Act and President Trump not going to Congress to get, quote-unquote, authority for the bombing of Iran. I always thought that was a red herring. It's a political argument. I guess it's nice to fill up the ink and the media attention, but it's meaningless because if you really wanted to stop any type of military advancement by a president, it's all about the purse strings. Stop funding the war effort. Congress funds the war effort. And so the story today is that the Pentagon is preparing a supplemental budget request of roughly $50 billion to replenish the weapons used in the recent conflict. The proposal could be unveiled as soon as Friday and could change, according to Reuters, citing a source. So if Congress really, really wanted to invoke the War Powers Act, you know what? You would stop the military funding. But they're not going to stop the military funding, which is basically a de facto endorsement of this military operation. So this whole talk about the War Powers Act is such mindless drivel, in my humble and inexperienced opinion, because if the Congress really wanted to stop him from doing, or any president, you would stop funding the war effort and say you can't do it, and we're not funding it. But they're not doing it. This will pass. And so, therefore, it's an approval of what he's doing. My 2 cents. Stay right there. We'll talk gas prices and natural gas. And what about the Strait of Hormuz? President Trump threatening to have military and naval escorts through the Strait of Hormuz, the 21 most vital miles in the world right now. We'll come back and talk about that. America at Night, back in a moment.
You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Welcome to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Every time America invades a Middle Eastern country, gas prices go and spike. Well, that's exactly what happened these last couple of days. But what's the future hold? They're talking about shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. What does all that mean? We're going to talk to a man who is the managing director of ClearView Energy Partners. He's a senior associate. Kevin Book, welcome to America at Night.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Good. Before we talk about the future, let's talk about the last couple of days. What have gas prices done in the last couple of days since the invasion?
Well, pretty notably, McGraw, they rose 12 cents just overnight. Gasoline prices, though, are only one part of the story. They reflect, among other things, rises in oil prices. If you think about the rise in the oil price over the same interval in gallon terms, the gasoline price is only halfway to where oil is gone. So there's more room to go.
But that's just pure speculation, right? There's still plenty of gas in the pipeline. That's just sort of a knee-jerk reaction.
Well, I don't think it's anything to do with running out of gasoline. We're not at that point by any means. But what it does mean is that if you look at the latency between the movement in crude oil prices, they move first. It takes a while for that to wash through the gasoline supply here in the United States. Every service station has 3, sometimes a little bit more days of inventory. It takes a while when you go through the refinery system, out into the distribution hubs, and finally to the service stations before you see the price move as fast as the oil price moves.
Okay, so they've threatening shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. Have they? And we hear that there are 100 or so ships that are not passing through. Give us a sense of what's going on there.
Yeah, when you say shut down, there's two ways to think about it. One is that Iran explicitly blocks travel through the strait, either with naval harassment of ships passing, missiles, or mines even. Or the other way to think about it is that passage has stopped for other reasons, including the risks associated with the war. And we're really in number two instead of number one. So Iran has threatened to stop ships, threatened to shoot missiles at ships that pass through. And sea captains and insurers and parties who are considering traversing the strait are saying, wait, this is too risky. Or their insurance companies are saying, we're not going to cover you if you do this. And so effectively, we're at a de facto shutdown. Only a very small amount of the traffic that ordinarily goes through the strait is still passing through it now.
Kevin, we keep hearing that America is oil positive. We pump more out of the ground than we use. Obviously, we're better than we have been in the past, but why is it such a big deal? Can't we just turn on our own spigots?
In fact, it's because our spigots have been turned on, McGraw, that things are not worse than they would be if we didn't have the kind of production we've had over the last 15 years. Over the last 15 years, the U.S. has added about 70% of the supply to the global supply growth. That's provided a tremendous buffer, and without it, things would be much, much tighter. But the problem is that oil prices globally, we're connected to a global oil system. So when there's a shortage somewhere in the system, that washes ashore on our coasts as well.
So where is that oil going out of the Strait of Hormuz?
About 80% of it goes to Asian markets. So it's actually mostly eastbound. And in fact, if you look at it from the other side of the picture, from China's point of view, about 50% of the oil they import comes through the Strait of Hormuz, and they import about 75% of the oil they consume. So it's a very big deal for Asia. But again, that doesn't mean that we are immune to the price effects because the pricing is global.
Will Asia suffer more than the United States if this continues?
Differentially, yes, at least in terms of sourcing the actual physical cargoes if it continues. And that probably also means that they'll have to bid to try to find substitute supplies and pay more than they otherwise would.
How much of all this is affected by the lack of Russian oil on the markets?
Well, there's still plenty of Russian oil on the markets relative to what there could be if we'd used a different kind of sanction or a different approach back when war broke out in 2022. What's interesting, though, is that particularly from China's perspective, they've become effectively the buyer of last resort for a lot of sanctioned barrels that were distressed and discounted. And those discounted barrels are starting to go away, Venezuela being the first place where they've disappeared from China's inputs. And now also Iran. Those Iranian barrels aren't flowing really either. And so what that means, among other things, is that there's probably more Chinese interest in those Russian barrels.
Kevin Book with us, managing director of the ClearView Energy Partners. Let's talk about natural gas because natural gas is also affected by this. Talk about that for a moment.
Very much. So, natural gas is a slightly different story here in the United States because the U.S. natural gas supply is relatively disconnected from the global market. But if you think about the way gas moves, most of it moves, about 70% of it moves on pipelines across national borders. But the 30% that travels on the water as liquefied natural gas, cooled very, very, very low temperatures and in gets denser, travels on ships, that about 20% of that LNG supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz and is now currently impaired. Not only is the traffic impaired, but the big producer in Qatar, which is responsible for almost all of the Strait of Hormuz LNG, is currently shut down. So this has differential impacts. Again, less for us, really. We've only seen a small increase in natural gas prices in Louisiana at the Henry Hub, where we price it. But in Europe, we've seen nearly a doubling at peak sort of intraday trading prices for the natural gas price there, and a similar move, not quite as much, in Asian markets. So a very significant impact.
Has Europe Europe's turned their back on Russian natural gas, have they not?
Well, they've started a phase down, which goes through several steps, and by the end of November 2027, they're supposed to be completely off of Russian natural gas. They're still importing a significant amount of liquefied natural gas, and there is some pipeline gas going into Europe as well right now.
So how much of this is going to affect Europe a lot more than anybody else, I would think?
Yeah, it is. That transition has made them more reliant on LNG, and when LNG prices rise, they will feel it more.
Yeah. Kevin Book, what are you watching? What are you looking for? What are you most worried about going forward?
Well, I think there's a couple of dimensions that matter most. One is the duration of the interruption. The second is the scope of the conflict. So the first one matters because every single day that the Strait of Hormuz is shut down, you lose 20 million barrels of the 104, 105 million barrels per day of liquid supply, and about a similar proportion, about 20% of the global LNG supply. That's a very big deal. But the second part is also important. The production system is highly concentrated. There's a lot of facilities in the region. Some of them are being targeted directly by Iran and are shutting down, like the LNG facility in Qatar that I mentioned. But others are being hit by shrapnel and debris when countermeasures are being taken against incoming ordnance. And so there are shutdowns that are happening in the region. There's damage to facilities that is occurring. And if the conflict really spreads and Iran continues to attack its neighboring producers, we could see disruptions that have a different character. They're not just about getting cargoes through a blocked waterway or a waterway that's too risky. They'll be about not having cargoes to ship in the first place.
President Trump tonight has said that he's going to charge the Navy with chaperoning ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Is that possible? And would that put a dent in some of this?
It is not only possible. It happened historically nearly 40 years ago during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. Operation Earnest Will, it was called. And tankers were escorted by U.S. Navy vessels then. There were some differences. It was Kuwaiti tankers, and they were reflagged as American ships for that operation. This particular operation, there are probably a lot of different tankers that they're going to have to move through. But it did make a difference then. It could make a difference now. It's not clear that entirely eliminates the risk. It's still an active combat zone, but it's a pretty big deal when U.S. warships are at your side.
You mentioned insurance. Are there situations where the insurance company would tell the owner of the boat you're not allowed to go through because it's too risky?
Well, they'll tell them you can't have a policy if you want to go through because we're not going to insure you. And that's the second part of what President Trump announced today. He told the Development Finance Corporation to work on insurance products to support the ability of ships to be able to get insurance to go through the strait. And so I think we'll see more from them as they start to work out and execute on that.
If the Navy were to do this, like President Trump said it would, I mean, can they sort of solve the bottleneck? I mean, are we talking enough Navy to keep it safe, if you will? I mean, or are we talking like a couple of ships, or can they really sort of move those ships through and sort of get back to somewhat normal?
Well, we're a little outside my immediate expertise. I don't know precisely what ratio of warships to tankers you need, but we're talking about dozens, nearly 100 tankers sort of traffic through the strait, and so I'm not entirely sure. That would probably take a different guest.
Yeah. So let's talk about Iran's attack on the other Arab countries. It seems like they are going after some of their gas and oil infrastructure. Is that what you're seeing?
That is, and there was a prototype for this in 2019 when drones and missiles struck the Saudi producing and processing facilities. One of them, one of the biggest processing facilities in the world at Abqaiq, and another one, an oil field called Khurais. And there was a pretty significant shutdown at the time, about 5.7 million barrels per day of global capacity shut down briefly. And the risks are very significant because of that. So you have a lot more producing assets in the area than just the Saudis. And what we're seeing is that it looks like they're trying to hit their Arab neighbors.
Break this down for me, Kevin Book, Managing Director, ClearView Energy Partners, Senior Associate. Look into your crystal ball, and what happens to gas prices over the next, say, 2 or 3 weeks?
Well, if the duration of the shutdown continues for the next 2 or 3 weeks, we could see $25 a barrel in upside travel to the crude oil price or more, which would translate to about 60 cents a gallon at the pump from February 27th. We've got about 15 of those cents into the price right now, so plenty of room for upside. If it goes further than that, or if there's very significant damage to producing facilities, then it could go higher. But there are some mitigating options. Strategic government reserves, stockpiles that could be drawn down to help modulate the price. And so you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself until you know what the future holds.
Yeah, interesting. One really last question, and that is, you mentioned because of the U.S. production of oil, we're in a much better place today than we were years ago. What about the advent of the electric car? Has that also helped mitigate some of these issues?
A little bit. There's about 85 million electric cars on the road in the world today. If you think about it, we drive more. We have less efficient vehicles. If you replaced U.S. light-duty vehicles, gasoline-powered vehicles with electric cars, for every million you put on the road in place of our existing cars, you'd save about 30,000 barrels per day of oil demand. It's a little bit less in the other countries because they drive less, they have more efficient cars. So what we're really not seeing is a very big change in sort of demand resilience because of electrification. Where we're seeing it is mostly from the efficiency gains of vehicles over the years, and also that oil has become a less significant part of economic growth in every country, pretty much, with a few exceptions. So we're what economists would call much less oil intensive as economies, which makes us more resilient at times of high prices. But that electrification is not yet at a point where you really get a big transformation, because there's about 1.4 billion light-duty vehicles on the roads in the world today.
Interesting. Kevin Book, Managing Director, ClearView Energy Partners, Senior Associate. Great stuff, great insight. Thank you for joining us on a very busy day. Thanks for checking in. Be safe.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. Kevin Book, Managing Director, ClearView Energy Partners. It was a pretty good synopsis of what's going on in the gas and natural gas world. We're lucky to have him. So good stuff. America at Night, back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Relax. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
I know there's a lot of gloom and doom out there over this bombing of Iran. And if you read the headlines or you read the leads in some of these stories, the tanking stock market, the spiking oil prices, the Dow was down 400 points today. The NASDAQ, the S&P, and the Russell were all up yesterday. They were down today, but down 400. When the Dow was around 48, I'm sorry, it's just not tanking. The market is not tanking. It's just not. Oil prices are not spiking. They're up a little bit, but they're not spiking. Now, if you're an American and you're stuck in Dubai and you can't get home, yeah, you're freaking out. Granted, you want to get home. But the world's not imploding, and there's not worldwide chaos over this. So you need to sort of take a deep breath and sort of get your facts straight. Tragedy, terrible, awful, heartbreaking that 6 soldiers have passed away. Terrible, terrible, awful that a number of friendly fire incidents happened. All terrible. Never is that acceptable, right? It's always heartbreaking. But again, we're day 4, day 5 into this, and there's a whole lot of pearl clutching and glooming and dooming, and let's just hang tight and let's not sort of get ahead of ourselves, and let's wait and see how this thing plays out. Again, said it before and I'll say it again. This could be a stroke of genius. President Trump could have pulled off the impossible, and it could go south. At this point, we just don't know. Coming up next hour, we're going to leave the bombing of Iran and talk a little feature. We're going to talk to an author who's wrote a great new book about the suave mid-century Bennett Cerf, who wrote children's books. He was on What's My Line? The man started Random House. He was a great character of the 20th century. We'll come back and talk about that. The text line is alive and well. I love this one from Chicago. McGraw, stay away from discussing politics and world events. Not only are you missing major facts in the Iranian situation, your points are elementary. Stick with baseball and book reviews. Here's another one, Raymond in Oregon. I think you're a huge liberal in sheep's clothing. Just like Marjorie Taylor Greene, just like Tucker Carlson, just like Megyn Kelly, Liz Cheney, all of them. Huge liberals in sheep's clothing. Here's another one. Have you tried caffeinated free soda? I'm not a fan, but I was just wondering if you'd give it a try. You know what? I'll tell you what. Caffeine-free Diet Coke is not bad. For those who are trying to get off caffeine, I've been trying to get off caffeine. The doctors told me, cut it out. So I went through some serious caffeine withdrawals last week. Was not happy. This week, so much better, but still not 100%. And yeah, I broke down and got a 12-pack of caffeine-free Diet Coke. And I got to tell you, it's actually pretty good. It doesn't have the same kick, but it gets you over the rough spots. There's no question. Huge fan. Caffeine-free Diet Coke in the gold can. Check it out. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Bennett Cerf, Nothing Random, a new book about a suave 20th century character. Bennett Cerf is coming up straight ahead. But I'll leave you with this. You have a hard time getting up in the morning? You could try Pavlov's shock clock. It goes for $159, and it will shock you with 300 volts to wake you up in the morning if you have a hard time getting up in the morning and you have trouble when you sleep through your alarm. What? There are now alarm clocks that will shock you. You can wear it on your wrist, set the alarm. It's called Pavlov's Shock Clock 3, and it goes for $160, and it will shock you. It will shock you awake. Boy, you really got to be a good sleeper if you can't wake up to your alarm. How about that? All right, and then, of course, in hour number 3, we have got open phones because it is Tuesday on America at Night. Bennett Cerf is a man who you may have heard about. I did not know anything about Bennett Cerf until this book surfaced. It's a brand new book. He was on What's My Line? He was a writer of children's books and children's joke books, which people have revered. He also was best friends with some of the best writers of the 20th century. Everybody from Ayn Rand to Truman Capote, and it didn't matter their politics. He was friends with all of them. So that is going to be our topic tonight. Stay right there. You are in for a treat because our author tonight is a great storyteller. Gayle Feldman, author of Nothing Random, the story of the beginning of Random House. We will do all of that coming up here in just one moment. America at Night. Stay right there. Back in a moment.
This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Join the nightly conversation, America at Night, with McGraw Milhaven.
Well, who doesn't like a good mid-century yarn when society was at its best? People were having fun and going to parties. There is a new book out about the mid-century, and it's about a man who started Random House. The book is called Nothing Random. Bennett Cerf and the publishing house he built, the author of Random House. Gayle Feldman is the author. Gayle, welcome to America at Night.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
How hard was it to get this book published?
I really didn't know what I'd taken on and how huge a life Bennett Cerf had. It took 23 years to do the book.
Take me through that. So you got the idea 23 years ago?
Yeah, I was an editor of books in London, and I grew up in Philly, but I did graduate work at Cambridge University, and then I worked in publishing in London and was in the UK for 13 years. And when I came home, it was to New York rather than Philly, and I had trouble finding a job in book publishing, but I had written a few articles about the book world and in England, and I managed to get a job working for Publishers Weekly and became a senior editor there. So I knew about the book business. I'd worked in it for a long time. And I had a fellowship in that fateful year of 2001 to 2002 at the Columbia Journalism School. And I did a short book comparing best-selling books and prize-winning books. And I stumbled upon the fact that Columbia University had the Random House archive and Bennett Cerf's personal archive. And I poked into them a little bit, and that's when I discovered, I'd heard Cerf's name over the years because I'd worked in book publishing. But that's when I discovered what an amazing life he had. And that's when I did the proposal and got the contract.
There you go. The book is called Nothing Random, Bennett Cerf and the publishing house he built. Gayle Feldman is our guest, published by Penguin Random House, so that's kind of interesting. So tell us, Bennett Cerf is probably the most famous person people don't know. Who is Bennett Cerf?
Right. Well, in his day, everybody in America knew him. He's the only book publisher who was a really public man because he did more than publish books, a lot more than publish books. He was on television, on CBS, on a program called What's My Line, every Sunday night for 16 years. What's My Line was an incredibly popular game show where a panel of 4 had to guess people's professions and also had to guess, they were given masks and had to guess who a mystery guest who disguised his or her voice was. And people just adored the show. So he was a TV personality in the very early days of TV personalities. But he also published anthologies of jokes and anecdotes and riddles for adults and for kids. And some of them were bestsellers. The first one, which he published towards the end of World War II, was a #1 bestseller. He also had columns in national newspapers, syndicated all over the country, and in magazines. And every year, for about 4 weeks, he would go on lecture tours across the country and sometimes lecture to as many as 5,000 or 8,000 people at one time. He was known.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Sounds like he was America's guest in a sense.
Yeah, and he used all of that to help what he knew was the most important part of his life and career. That was as a book publisher. As a young man, well, he was a New York City public school boy who was very smart and tested into the only public academic high school in the city in those days that guaranteed you a place at college, City College, if you graduated. But in his final year, just before the final year started, he dropped out. And he dropped out because his mother was dying. But he managed to get to college, nevertheless, and to Columbia University, no less, by, in those days, you could do courses, night courses, and take tests, and he tested in. He started work on Wall Street, but that really wasn't what he wanted to do. He was in the stock brokerage. When he had the chance to work for a book publisher, he grabbed it. I mean, he'd been the editor of the humor magazine at Columbia. He'd been high up on the student newspaper, and he wanted either to write or to publish. And he got this job working for the only publisher you've never heard of, who was completely brilliant, a man named Horace Liveright. And he spent less than 2 years with Liveright, but learned a lot and in certain ways modeled himself after Liveright. And Liveright published the first books by Ernest Hemingway, by William Faulkner, by Eugene O'Neill, and he published T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, and many, many, many famous writers. And after less than 2 years working for Liveright, Cerf bought Liveright's crown jewel, which was started by Liveright, the Modern Library. Cerf got his best friend from Columbia to go into business with him, and the two guys, the best friend was named Donald Klopfer, they bought it. And they ran with it. I mean, in 2 years, they made back their investment, and they rejuvenated the Modern Library by changing the binding, changing the design, marketing the hell out of it. They went on the road themselves and visited bookstores selling the books, and they were both very charming young men. Mm. And 2 years after starting the buying the Modern Library, they started Random House to publish new books.
And we're off and running. Gayle Feldman is our guest. The book is called Nothing Random, Bennett Cerf and the publishing house he built. You write the book like a party, right? Everybody wants to hang around this guy. He's an enigma. Every room he walks into, he knows somebody. He's glad handing. He's sort of an everyman and can sort of talk the deepest conversations with somebody and crack the best jokes with somebody else 5 minutes later.
Yeah. To use a 20th century term, he was a switchboard. He was somebody who had great charm. He was very warm. When he was young, he was extremely handsome. He was very open. As a publisher, he published mass and class, high and low. Mm. So, he published, he a court case that allowed Ulysses, James Joyce's Ulysses, to be legally published in America. He published Faulkner. He published Gertrude Stein. He published Philip Roth. But he also published Dr. Seuss. And he published James Michener. And he published Ayn Rand. He published Babar, the elephant. And he knew everybody in books, Broadway, TV, and Hollywood.
All right, here's my question for you, Gayle. Was he a genius because he saw and found Dr. Seuss? Did Dr. Seuss come to him, or was it time and place in which all these great literary geniuses just came to his door and anybody could have done it at the time?
Dr. Seuss had a couple of books published by a different publisher in New York called Vanguard Press. But Bennett, as I've indicated, was a guy who loved humor and jokes. Some people thought he was like a leaky faucet, leaking jokes all the time. Anyway, he recognized the incredible talent in Dr. Seuss, and he invited him to lunch, and he charmed him, and he promised him that, he would publish all the books that he could possibly write. And Dr. Seuss connected with him. They became friends for life, and Bennett did indeed publish all his books, except when in the 1950s, Americans began to worry that America was falling behind the Soviet Union. There was something called Sputnik. And people thought that kids weren't learning to read properly. And there were big articles in newspapers, magazines, why can't Johnny read? And one of those articles suggested that the geniuses of the children's book world, people like Walt Disney and Dr. Seuss and a few others, should, suddenly start writing books for kids. Well, Walt Disney was otherwise engaged, but a school's publisher, Houghton Mifflin, approached Dr. Seuss and said, would you do a reading primer for us? Would you do a beginning elementary reader? And they had to go to Bennett to deal with him because he was Dr. Seuss's publisher. And Bennett said, well, yep, okay, Houghton Mifflin can publish the textbook. Dr. Seuss can write it. But we want to reserve the right to sell that book into bookstores. That book was The Cat in the Hat. And when The Cat in the Hat was published, and it was very, very hard. It was not at all easy. Dr. Seuss's real name was Ted Geisel. And, Geisel's wife told the story of, the number of words was very, very limited. And he would do drafts and, throw them away. So it took at least a year for him to do the book. When it was published as a school text by Houghton Mifflin, schools did not respond favorably. It didn't get many sales. But when Random House published it and sold it into bookstores, parents went crazy. They saw that this book would help their kids, and they bought it in droves. And the rest is history.
That is a great story. Stay right there. Gayle Feldman is our guest. She is the author of a book called Nothing Random, Bennett Cerf and the Publishing House He Built. He published Truman Capote, William Faulkner, Gertrude Stein, Ayn Rand, mentioned Dr. Seuss, Toni Morrison, James Michener, friends with George Gershwin, Frank Sinatra. This book is researched and studied and interviewed everybody and anybody who had something to do with Bennett Cerf. Stay right there. More to get to. Nothing Random is the book. Gayle Feldman, our guest. America at Night. Back in a moment.
Welcome to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
The book is called Nothing Random, Bennett Cerf and the Publishing House He Built. Gayle Feldman is our guest. Fascinating story about one of the most interesting men in the 20th century, rediscovering him all over again. Gayle, tell the story about Toni Morrison, because it sounds like Bennett Cerf was able to find these diamonds in the rough, these literary geniuses, and polished them and made them diamonds.
Well, I think they went a long way themselves to make themselves diamonds. But Bennett, in the 1960s, in 1959, he took Random House public, and in 1960, he began buying other publishing companies. He bought Knopf, he bought Cancian. Both were wonderful purchases. And he bought some educational and college textbook publishers. One such was a publisher based in Syracuse, New York. And at first it did well, and then it didn't do so well. And there came a point where the parts of the company were sold, and other parts were brought down to New York City. And there was a particular editor who was brought down to New York City because it was recognized that she had talent. She was a textbook editor, a high school textbook editor. Her name was Toni Morrison. She was published, not her first book, but from the second book on, she was published by Knopf, which by that time Bennett owned. But she herself was an editor, a very important editor at Random House, who published Black authors and books about African American culture. Incredibly important. But Bennett had already, in 1952, published Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, which won the National Book Award, and that was a milestone. And he also published Lorraine Hansberry, the famous playwright. So Random House had a number of famous Black authors on his list.
The heyday of publishing. Tell me about Truman Capote.
Bennett published everything that Truman Capote wrote in book form, and first met Truman when he was very young in the 1940s. Truman kind of looked on Bennett as a kind of father figure. Although they had a jokey relationship, they had a very serious relationship. And I don't think that Truman Capote could have written In Cold Blood without the support of Bennett Cerf and his wife Phyllis. They loved Truman, and Truman loved them, particularly Bennett. And it was Bennett who gave Truman wrote several of his books, first as articles for the New Yorker magazine, and then Random House published them as books. So he got this job to write about these murders in Kansas for the New Yorker. But he knew no one in Kansas, and the editor of the New Yorker knew no one in Kansas. But Bennett had connections in Kansas that he'd made on his lecture tours. So he provided the introductions that Capote, who was a very unusual figure in those days, an openly gay man, that he needed in rural Kansas. And Bennett supported Truman emotionally during the writing of In Cold Blood, which took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And then in the end, when Capote, who had become an alcoholic, and during the writing of In Cold Blood, because the stress was so very great, when he had to go out to Kansas to see the killers of the Clutter family hang, the editor of the New Yorker was not going to go with him. Bennett was not going to go with him, but Bennett made sure that someone did go with him. His editor, Joseph Fox, who was a marvelous, very famous editor, he edited John Irving, Martin Cruz Smith, and he edited In Cold Blood. Joe Fox went with Capote to Kansas. Capote saw one of the killers hang. He could not face seeing the second killer hang. They went back to New York. Before they got on the plane, they phoned Bennett. And then on the plane, Joe Fox sat next to Truman Capote, and Capote wept during the entire flight, and Joe Fox held his hand while trying not to notice all the people sitting around them.
Mm. So what is it about Bennett Cerf that can, because that Truman Capote In Cold Blood, that's an obscure murder in Kansas, and they're sitting in New York. So Truman Capote gets this crazy idea to write this story. Bennett Cerf's got to see the vision of Truman Capote. Mm-hmm. He's got to see the vision of Ayn Rand. He's got to see the vision of these people. And I've been around writers enough to know that I don't even think they know what their vision is when they start off on the book. What was how did Bennett Cerf see that in Truman Capote and these others? That was his genius, wasn't it?
Well, he was a very smart man. I mean, he was not a genius, but as I said, he'd been a high school dropout, and he left Columbia as a Phi Beta Kappa. He was very smart, and he was a reader, a real reader. He read the books he published. He loved books. In many ways, they changed his life. He had tremendous instincts about books and people. He did write editorial reports. I've read some of them that remain, and he had a very acute sense of what needed to be done, and also how a book could be marketed. And he knew the difference between good writing and bad writing. I mean, and he had a sense of what different writers write for different reasons. They need different things. Gertrude Stein was very famous for the Picassos and Matisses that hung on her apartment walls in Paris. But she wanted to be famous for the books that she wrote. He helped bring her and organize her American tour. She came back to America after living in Paris for 30 years. And she traveled all over the country, giving lectures to fancy women's clubs, but also to colleges. A young student at the University of Texas named Walter Cronkite interviewed her. So she wanted fame. Ayn Rand had published a book called The Fountainhead, which had done very well. And then she'd worked for many years on a book called Atlas Shrugged. And there were about a half dozen publishers who wanted to publish that book because of the sales of the previous book. And at first, she didn't think that Bennett would be the right publisher because he was very well known as a liberal politically. He published FDR's papers, et cetera, et cetera. He took her out to lunch, and he said, I will not censor you. You know, I will publish your book as you write it. And she was charmed and impressed by him. In her eyes, you know, she dealt with archetypes, heroic archetypes. And in her eyes, he was the archetype of a publisher she had dreamed about. And when he published Atlas Shrugged, his copy of the book, which she inscribed to him, is at Columbia University, and she wrote in it, to Bennett Cerf, the ideal publisher I never expected to find.
Did he never censored her, but did he give, as they say in the business, helpful notes, right? Did he help Truman Capote? Did they take the notes? Did they take, I don't want to say his criticism, but his suggestions, or did he just let him go and never touched it?
Well, Capote, generally, when he delivered a manuscript, it was like a finely polished jewel. Early on, there was a book that he wrote that the ending, it was called The Grasshopper, that the ending didn't seem to gel. And Bennett and Truman's editor both felt he needed to work a bit more on it, but he could not change the ending. And he said he wanted the ending to stand as it was, so they let it. But there were other books where Bennett told one author who produced a bestseller in the end, you need to cut this book in half, and the book was cut in half. Or Bud Schulberg, who wrote What Makes Sammy Run and Waterfront, which as a film was on the waterfront, he did editorial suggestions that he conveyed to Schulberg's editor, which were taken up. However, Ira Levin, the author of Rosemary's Baby, whom I interviewed, told me that Bennett called him in and they had a friendly chat, and after reading the manuscript of Rosemary's Baby, Bennett said, you know, I'm a little concerned that the ending, it's going to be too scary for some people. And, you know, couldn't Rosemary be involved in a taxi accident and lose the baby? and Ira Levin said to me, I sat there and I listened to Bennett. I liked Bennett. And I said, Bennett, I think we have to go with my ending. And Bennett said, it's your book. We'll go with your ending.
Gayle Feldman, our guest. The book is called Nothing Random. Bennett Cerf and the publishing house he built. He was a quintessential American original, Bennett Cerf. Let me ask you a question. I got just a couple minutes left here, Gayle. It sounds like you had a whole lot of fun researching this book. You went through his papers. You interviewed many people, hundreds of interviews, all sorts of source material. Do you have a favorite story of Bennett, or one of those stories where you just couldn't believe it?
Yeah, I have a story that was about Ulysses, the publication of Ulysses, which was such a big deal in its day. I mean, to get that book published legally in America at a time when, you know, books had been highly censored, it was a landmark court case. But Random House was a very new company, and I had to figure out, why did James Joyce, who lived in Paris, agree to let this upstart company publish the book? And Bennett, I dug and dug. There was this article he wrote about the publication of Ulysses, in which he mentioned somebody, and he joked a lot, as I said, and there was this joking reference to a guy named Robert Castor, who was going to Paris and had asked if Bennett would like him to say something to Mr. Joyce, about his wanting to publish Ulysses, and Bennett wrote. And I said, yes. Well, I had to find out who was this guy, Robert Castor, because he wasn't mentioned in all the stuff I'd read, all the books that have been written about Joyce and Ulysses, and there have been many. So I thought, I'm going to do some searches online in the historic New York Times. And I plugged in this man's name and came up with his daughter's wedding announcement. And it gave the daughter's name and her husband's name. And so I began doing searches and old telephone directory searches for the husband, who was a doctor. And I came up with a phone number. And I dialed, and an old lady answered, and it turned out to be the daughter of this man, and whose wedding announcement it had been. And what she had were papers, letters, and telegrams between James Joyce and his son and her father. Her father had worked at the stock brokerage firm where Bennett had worked. And he ended up acting as the go-between between Joyce and Bennett because his sister was married to Joyce's son. And it was the go-between and Joyce's daughter-in-law who convinced Joyce to go with Random House.
That is a great story. The book is called Nothing Random. Bennett Cerf, a man you might not have heard of, but you certainly know his work. You're going to discover him here in this book, Nothing Random. Bennett Cerf and the publishing house he built, Gayle Feldman. Gayle, first of all, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your story. You are welcome back anytime. You're a great storyteller. Good luck with the book, and hopefully we get to chat down the road.
Thank you so much for inviting me, McGraw. It was great fun.
Nothing Random. Bennett Cerf and the publishing house he built. America at Night. Back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, it's primary night in Texas, and some results are in. 60% of the vote is in the Republican primary, and it looks like they're headed for a runoff. James Cornyn and Ken Paxton. Cornyn's got 43% of the vote. Paxton's got 40% of the vote. You need 50 or you go for a runoff. There's 13% for the other candidates. So it looks like, from all accounts, they're headed for a runoff, and it's still anyone's game. 43-40 is pretty close, with 13% going to that third candidate. As for the Democrats, it looks like James Tallarico, with 63% of the vote, is leading Jasmine Crockett 52-47. So still within striking distance, but it looks like James Tallarico has got the lead with 63% of the vote. Next hour, it's open phones, open texts, open phones. We'll do it. What are you thinking? Give us a call. We'd love to talk to you. 1-844-2-McGraw. Stay right there. The phones are already starting to line up. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night on Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
I don't know where the night went. We're already deep into hour number 3. Welcome back. It's open phones, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Those are the phone numbers. We mentioned last hour the results from the primary down in Texas. That's getting a lot of attention, and it looks like Cornyn and Ken Paxton are going for a runoff, which will be interesting because right now Ken Paxton's losing 43-40, so it's still close with that 13% with that third candidate. I'm not smart enough to know how Texas is, how that third candidate is going to chop up the vote, but you have to have 50%. So that third candidate has spoiled the opportunity for one of them to gain 50%. I don't know where that goes. I don't know if it's going to go to Cornyn. I don't know if it's going to go to Ken Paxton. Maybe somebody down in Texas can give us a call and give us their sort of keen insights into how that is going to work. But Tallarico, James Tallarico looks like right now he's still beating Jasmine Crockett, and that's 53-47. Pretty healthy lead with 65% of the vote in. So we'll see where all that goes. A couple of other interesting notes before we go to the phones. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. This morning, or I guess at some point today, it was announced that Savannah Guthrie, remember that story? It's been like 28 days, been good 4 weeks since her mom went missing. According to sources, according to people, according to reports, is that Savannah Guthrie is quietly sort of going to return back to New York after saying her goodbyes to her mother. It's been more than a month since the mother has disappeared. There are no credible leads. There is no credible evidence. No one knows what happened. And so there is a memorial outside of the house. You saw the other day where the family sort of went and paid their respects to this sort of makeshift memorial outside of the house. A close friend told news reporters that she didn't want it to be goodbye, but she knows that she can't live in limbo forever, right? You have to sort of move on. And so it looks like that she is going to return to the Today Show. There's still $1 million reward out there for somebody who has any information leading to the details of what happened. But they're coming to the grips with the fact that she may be lost, she may already be gone, and that they can't live in limbo, and they have to sort of move on, right? You knew this day was going to happen at some point, but it looks like there are at least some news reports are starting to leak out that Savannah Guthrie, and the other day there was even stories that she said that she is going to head back to the Today Show, and you can only imagine how difficult that's going to be. But in some ways, it's probably good therapy for her to sort of get back among friends and working in some capacity, even though it's a high-profile job. You still have to sort of, I'm sure it's a part of what do I know? But you just sort of feel really bad for the woman, right? To have her mother abducted and then to sit there on the evening news every night. And I don't know. I don't wish that on my worst enemy. Anyway, phone numbers, 314-931-5877, 314-931-5877. Text your comments to 84126. We got the phones lining up right now. Get your texts going. We'll get the phones going. Paul in Boise, you're first up tonight. Welcome to America at Night.
Thanks for taking my call. You know, you just mentioned about Savannah. I was hoping that maybe her and her best friend or one of her best friends could go on a cruise for a couple of weeks and just chill out. And instead of going back into work, and I don't know, that's how I felt, that maybe she could get over some of it. Never get over any of it, really, to be honest with you. But I just felt maybe a cruise would be a good idea. That's that. You know, Bennett Cerf. My parents owned a used bookstore. My dad was a doctor, But my mother always wanted a used bookstore after the kids grew up. And that's what he did, was he bought her a used bookstore. One came available in the town that we lived in, Monterey. And so it was determined, since I wasn't going to make it in school, that I had to learn the business. And so I learned a lot about books that I never would have learned had I not had a hard time in class. So I got 35,000 different titles to choose from as far as wanting to learn something.
Yeah.
If something on the spine looked good, I'd take it off the shelf and thumb through it for a minute and then stack it and see about how much I wanted to read. So that was my education. It didn't sound like much, but it was a different one. Let's put it that way. It wasn't in the classroom at one of those little table chairs, the ones that are together. And
there's nothing better. There's nothing better than a good story and a good book.
Oh yeah, and I fell in love with John Steinbeck, the writer John Steinbeck. He was a little bit maligned, but he put out a great story, and there's still great stories in it for young kids and teenagers alike.
Yeah, absolutely. But, hey, Paul, thanks for the phone call. I got a full board here. I got to move on. Catherine in Vancouver, welcome to America at Night.
Hey, I got a really good idea.
Yes.
And I want to see if you're game. Like I need some investors in this. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because I think
the answer is no. If you're looking for money, the answer is no.
Oh, well, then you're going to miss out. Because,
okay. What do you got?
Because if you hook up your clock to the fire alarm, we can make millions, billions, and then we could call it the fire alarm clock, but then we could even shorten it and call it the alarm clock.
Catherine in Vancouver, the answer is no. Thanks for the phone call. I did have a crazy idea 100 years ago. I had an idea where you would record the message that you would wake up to. I guess sort of like a ringtone, kind of in a sense, but you would record your own message saying, "Time to get up, McGraw. McGraw, it's time. McGraw, it's 5:00 in the morning. Time to get up." Or you would have your wife, "Honey, sweetie, lovey, schmoopsy, time to get up," right? Or your kid, "Daddy, get up, Daddy." I thought if you could record the person waking you up, I thought that was a thing. It was an idea. It was fleeting. I think I created a business plan, but then I got lazy and didn't do anything about it and fell into radio. So there you go. Hey, Donald, Scott, Eduardo, hold that thought. We have lots more to get to. I want to give you plenty of time on the other side, and I don't want to get backed up on the bottom of the hour. Text line is officially open. Listen to this. I just got this text from, in Virginia. "Greetings, Mr. Milhaven. I will say that when you'd taken over for Rich Valdez, I was a bit disappointed with what seemed to me to be TDS light. You sounded very different from the guys I was used to hearing. However, I took some time to detox from media consumption, and when I rejoined your show, you actually are quite refreshing. Now, I did notice that you are catching some flack for not agreeing with everything President Trump does. Well, I say don't worry about that. It's nice to hear another take on current affairs. That said, if being a conservative today means joining a hive-minded cult, then I won't join, and I recommend that you don't either." Charles in Virginia. How about that? Here's another one. This is DJ. "I live in Clifton Park." He gave my text number. Sorry. Sorry. I can't read that one either. All right. Back in a moment. America at Night.
Miss a portion of tonight's show? Not a problem. Go to americaatnightlive.com to find a replay of every show. The floor is yours. Call or text 844-262-4729. That's 844-2-McGraw.
All right, let's go back to the phones. It's open phones and open text. We got some good texts. We'll get to them in a little later. Text or call 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Donald in St. Louis, welcome to America at Night.
Well, hey, thanks for taking my call, McGraw. And, I've listened to talk radio and for many years, and I think you're doing a very, very good job. I like Jim Bohannon and Rich Valdez prior to you. It's a big responsibility, so good luck with all that.
Thank you.
I want to comment, though. Do all the stations follow, are all the stations ABC News affiliates?
You mean on this network?
Yes.
No. It's each individual station has their own network affiliation. Some are CBS, some would be Fox, some would be the ABC, some would be CNN, some don't have affiliates, so it runs the gamut.
So all those local stations are now listening to what we're talking about?
So all the local stations on the some are preempted for a basketball game or a hockey game.
Okay.
Some are delayed. It sort of just depends on what radio station you're talking about.
Okay, well, real quick, I know you know that the United States Army and Air Force, we're right now in the middle of a big offensive in Iran. Do we know that, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. At the very top this hour, just now, somehow the ABC affiliate that I listen to here through St. Louis, but it was the ABC Network News, the reporter somehow dug up a audio of candidate President Donald Trump commenting on how his rhetoric would stop the wars. Okay, mm-hmm. And that was pretty much it. Mm-hmm. Which I'm not quite sure why they did that. Well, actually, I kind of know why they did that, but it's so terribly offensive right now to where we're at this country for a national ABC News network to use that as a backdrop of the top of the news right now as we're bombing another country to try to divide us is unconscionable, in my opinion. So thank you very much for taking my call. That's my comment. God bless everybody. God bless USA. Thank you.
There's Donald in St. Louis. I didn't hear it, so I can't comment on it. But being critical of President Trump and any president who is in the middle of a bombing campaign, I don't know if that's unpatriotic. MAGA's having a meltdown, right? MAGA's being split into two. The more traditional Republicans are much more sympathetic to President Trump, right? The more traditional Republicans. The MAGA is the ones that are split. I said this from the very beginning, right? You've got the Tucker Carlsons, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Megyn Kellys, the Steve Bannons, right? They're the ones who were sort of raising all sorts of negative commentary when it comes to President Trump and breaking his campaign promises and things like that. Now, there's some people in MAGA who their philosophy is if Donald Trump says it, then it's MAGA. But there's quite a number of MAGA people who are not happy with this. And so there's a bit of a rift. And so just because Marjorie Taylor Greene is critical of President Trump, I don't think that makes her un-American. But Donald, I thank you for the phone call. Scott in St. Louis, welcome to America at Night.
Yeah, I think the pro-war MAGAs should enlist.
Mm.
You know, I don't know. Donald might be too old, but you know, maybe does he have a son? Maybe his son could enlist. I don't know.
It is interesting.
They take him pretty old.
It is interesting how Joe Biden never got any credit for having a son in the military.
Right.
You know, I mean, he was a military father, and in a sense, I know his son didn't die while on active duty or in the theater, but there are many people who believe whatever he caught over in Iraq may have led to his death. So there may have been some, dealings with some chemicals and some burn units and things like that. So here's a man who gave his son to his country, and many people call him, all sorts of terrible things. You wouldn't do that to a Gold Star family normally, but because he's a Democrat, I guess you're allowed to criticize him. He never got any credit for people who might disagree with him politically, but I've never heard anybody say, I disagree with him politically, but I respect him and his family for joining and serving.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking at the Texas election results for the Senate, the primaries.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like about 1.5 million Democrats voted and about 1.4 million Republicans. I don't know. That's just, a rough estimate on my part. I know the Democrats outvoted the Republicans in the early votes, but, it looks like it got a little closer today. And, but I don't know. I mean, it looks like a good sign.
I don't think the only way the Democrats have a chance in this Texas Senate race is if Ken Paxton wins and James Tallarico wins. So if Cornyn wins, shut off the lights, the party's over. Democrats don't have a chance. But if Ken Paxton wins and James Tallarico wins, then you have yourself a fighting chance. But now it looks like Tallarico's going to win, right? There's 66% of the vote in. He's leading 52-47. This Cornyn-Paxton thing is going to have to go to a runoff. And again, this 13%, I don't know where that then goes after this next race. And it's going to be a runoff. And so I don't know. Are Democrats going to be able to then vote in this? Because it's kind of an open primary. So you're going to get a whole lot of Democrats who may be voting on this as well. So I'm not well enough schooled in Texas politics to sort of make a intelligent comment. But that won't stop me in the future from making ignorant comments. I'm just saying currently I won't tell you what I think or make a prediction because I don't know. But again, just because I don't know doesn't mean I can't give you a true, honest assessment of what's going to happen. Robert, Tony, Eduardo, text lines open. Phone lines are open. 1-844-2-McGraw. America at Night. Stay right there. More in a moment.
Coming to you from the heart of the nation, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Welcome back to America at Night. Call now, 844-262-4729. That's 844-2-McGraw.
All right, it's open phones. It's a Tuesday night, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Back to phones we go. Eduardo in Tampa, thanks for joining us on America at Night. Hello.
Hey, McGraw's great to hear from you again. I got a comment about some of the people that are attempting to flee over there, like in Dubai, and they've been using it, even an organization that's even based out of here, Tampa, the Gray Bull, who, by the way, they were the ones that got Maria Conchado to the Nobel Prize ceremony over there in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So some people are even using that. And, some of these hotels, given the region that they are, I know the Navy has like a laser. I don't know if that's going to be something in the future as far as shooting down missiles. But I was thinking when I see some of these hotels over there getting hit, how come they don't have lasers mounted on their rooftops? I think that'd be an interesting thing to happen down the line. I mean, they could already...
They're civilian buildings. They're not military buildings. Yeah. And I don't know if the local Marriott would know what to do with a laser if they had one. So, yeah. I mean, It might be a. No, I get it, but I mean, it's a hotel. It's not a military fortress, so they know how to run a hotel. They know how to cook a nice continental breakfast. They don't know anything about lasers on the roof.
Well, would they invite then having some kind of military staff being there to?
I mean, I guess you could get some type
that
of.
Would be the alternative.
I guess you could. I don't know the rules. It'd be hard to get your hands on military equipment, right? I mean, you can't just have a rocket launcher down at the convenience store. You gotta.
No, of course not.
I'm sure you gotta get through some type of vetting. So I don't know how that would work, but I mean, I don't know. It is interesting how these Americans are sort of scrambling to get back home. I'm not so sure. I saw an interview today with some woman who was upset because her plane was headed for Dubai and it turned around. I'm like, what are you doing going to Dubai anyway for? Can't you hold off until this thing's over with? I'm not so sure that's the smartest thing in the world.
Yeah. So Mike Huckabee, who's over there in Tel Aviv, he says that people should take a bus and make it to Cairo. That's what his advice is. I heard him say that.
I have a dear friend of mine whose daughter goes to school in Jerusalem, and during the whole Iranian thing with Hamas and Gaza and all that, I would check in with him on a regular basis, and he would tell me that Jerusalem, you wouldn't realize it, but there was no real effect in Jerusalem. But I was talking with Jordana Miller, ABC News, and she's living in an apartment, and each apartment there are certain guidelines. And if you build an apartment building in Jerusalem, you by law have to have some type of bomb shelter for the people who are living in that apartment complex. So they do take some precautions, and they do have some rules to sort of create bomb shelters for people who are living in apartments.
Okay.
Eduardo, I got to go.
Yeah.
Thanks for the phone call.
Thank you very much. Yep.
You got it. Robert in New Haven, Connecticut. Hello.
Well, I don't know if this subject's okay. This is regarding what happened in Hartford, Connecticut 2 days ago. It's the second shooting in Hartford by the police officers, and there's a 211 thing that a family member called up both times. But before I even complete this...
Hold on a second. Was this the one who was having the sort of mental health crisis breakdown?
Exactly. Yeah, the guy was like 300 pounds and he had a knife.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this question before I continue, if you don't mind. You and me, or you and your friend are in a backyard picnic with your wives, and there's a 6-month-old baby. You don't have a gun, but this neighbor or some fat guy comes with a knife. You don't have a gun, but they're going after the 6-month-old baby in the carrier. Do you think the 4 of you would be able to take that fat guy down, or do you sit there and watch? So let me continue before I complete it. The 110-pound friend of mine's daughter, Springfield, Connecticut, nurse, 11:30 at night, going to the 3rd floor to get in her car because she worked all night, and some big guy, 6'2", 200 pounds, that's following this 110-pound girl, bugging her for money, and she just got done. 11:30 at night. Mm-hmm. She's at a 3rd level. So she's like, what the hell? Her car's right there, and she's like scared. This guy's getting closer. So she turns around and pepper sprays this 200-pound, 6'2" man. She flies down stairs to the 1st floor, and there's the guy, security, who's checking all the cars. He flies upstairs. Guess what? The guy's still down. So my whole point is, you look at that video. Have your listeners watch it. I think it was March 1st. This guy has got his hands up, one hand up. 6 cops are there. You could tackle him. Why don't you pepper spray him? But no. 7 cops shows up. They've been talking for 9 minutes while the guy's walking down the road. Just imagine if we're in a barbecue and this guy's going near your baby or I got 3 or 4 grandkids. I'll tell you what. He ain't getting near it. But how could 5 trained police officers and this nurse? So I called up Hartford Police yesterday and said this nurse will train the officers on how to do it correctly.
Robert, I don't know much.
It's not
Robert,
funny,
no. It's not funny. I apologize. You're right. Look, Robert. Thank you for the phone call. I don't know enough about this story. I saw it briefly on the news. that this mental health person was having a bit of a crisis and there was a shooting. And I just, again, not that I don't comment on things I don't know about and sound stupid ultimately, but I just don't know enough about this to make an informed decision. I will say this. It is very difficult being a police officer. It is very difficult. And my heart goes out to all of them because, there but for the grace of God go any of us. I don't think that police officer woke up this morning with the intention or that morning with the intention of shooting and killing a man who was in the middle of a mental health crisis. These police officers, they need more training. They need more mental health training, right? We need not just officers, but mental health people on the front lines as well. But it's awful hard for me to sit here and criticize a police officer who I don't know the story of, and there but for the grace of God go any of us, because I just don't know what happened. Robert, thanks. Tony in Montreal, welcome to America at Night.
How you doing, McGraw?
Tony, how are you?
Thanks for taking my call. I was just going to comment on all the tremendous support President Trump is getting from the Democratic Party. He's getting all the support from one individual, Mr. Fetterman, a guy that suffered a brain aneurysm or a brain injury, and everybody was against this guy. I remember that people said he dressed weird, and they were scared of him and didn't know what he would be like, and a lot of people were against him when he was in Pennsylvania running, and all of a sudden, he's one of the people that's the most lucid in the party, and as far as I'm concerned anyway, but he says, look, it's not party before country, it's country before party, and he believes that the people in Iran that were running Iran were a dictatorship. I believe that he's right. They were fermenting and, creating all kinds of havoc in the world with Hamas and everybody, and he said they should be, eliminated. And I think Trump is the only person that actually would get that done. And we lived 50 years with the mullahs and their continual providing funds for Hamas, et cetera, around the Middle East. And today I'm happy they're gone. I have a lot of friends in Canada that are Iranians that were telling me that the only way to get rid of this problem is to eliminate the head of the whole country, the top echelons. They have to be removed. Yeah. They will not negotiate with anybody.
Look, I find it fascinating that George W. Bush came into office saying he was against nation building and he didn't want America to be the world's police officer. And he spent 7 years of his presidency being a nation builder and the world's policeman. President Trump said, I'm going to get us out of all foreign wars. I'm going to criticize everybody and anything to do with sending troops or anything else to the Middle East. And here he starts off his second, the first part of his second term, going after Venezuela and going after Iran. I don't know if it will be successful. It very well could be. We're all glad he's gone, but what's the consequences? So we'll just have to wait and see.
That I would say to that, McGraw, is nobody else in the world steps up. It always is the United States. As a Canadian, I'm not impressed with my government that has done nothing to support you other than to give you some trifle little statement. We have troops in the Middle East. We have frigates and ships in there. We should be in there because if I got to go because I got more phone calls. But I agree with you. In actuality, I think some of this, I think Donald Trump's a terrible salesman. I think he puts his foot in his mouth so many times, and they've bumbled the reasons, and they haven't been very buttoned up in all this. But I'm with you in a strange way. I'm actually somewhat optimistic that this actually he might be able to thread the needle, but it's a huge gamble. It is a huge gamble, and it very well could backfire, just like Mission Accomplished backfired on President Bush. We'll just have to wait and see. Tony, thanks for the phone call. Gil in San Antonio. Gil, welcome to America at Night.
Yes, I was listening, and there was a question about if in this runoff for the Senate seat, if Democrats who voted in the Democratic primary could cross over and vote in the Republican runoff.
Yeah.
They cannot.
They cannot. What about Democrats who didn't vote in this election? Can they vote the second time in the runoff?
Yes, they could vote in the runoff election for Senate if they did not vote in the Democratic primary.
All right, Gil, good stuff. In San Antonio, there's our man connected who knows what's going on in Texas. Good to see you. Danny in Rolla, Missouri. Hello.
What's going on?
How you doing, Danny?
Doing all right. You had a text that basically was calling you maybe a closet liberal.
Yes.
And I just kind of like to defend you a little bit. You and I don't agree with everything, and sometimes you're harsh on the more conservative partisan points, but anybody that agrees with everything is probably a fool. So I give you credit because at least you take the time to see two sides. And the other thing that I was thinking is that your previous guest, maybe very nice lady, very intelligent, accomplished author, but listening to her was like watching paint dry.
You know what, Danny? First of all, Danny, are you married?
Yes.
Okay. Do you agree with everything your wife says?
Oh, hell no.
Do you still love her?
Oh, you betcha.
Right. My agenda on this show is just interesting conversation. Guilty as charged. If all I want is interesting conversation, and if I make you think a little bit or challenge your point of view or whatever, I'm just trying to keep it interesting. That's it.
Hey, brother, I like that, and I respect that. That's why I said anybody that agrees with someone else all the time, so I don't get bleeped out on radio.
No. Yeah.
That's a butt kisser. That's a yes man. You need to have your own ideas, formulate your own opinions, and then go from there.
Danny,
you have a great night, brother.
Thank you, Danny. I appreciate it. I'm sorry you didn't like our guest, our featured guest tonight. I thought she was riveting. I thought she was fantastic. But, right? Look, if everybody agreed, if everybody liked the same thing, do you know how long the line would be? Jacob in the Bay Area. Jacob, welcome to America at Night.
Hello, Mr. McGraw. Thank you for taking my call.
Hi, Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing good. I just want to say on this Iran issue, as someone who voted for the first time ever for Donald Trump, I just want to say, I voted for him in 2020. I just want to say that I feel kind of betrayed by him on this Iran issue. I think that it's a beginning of another foreign entanglement in the Middle East that we as a country don't need right now. And I would just want to say, if I wanted this, I would have voted for Nikki Haley. That's all I'm going to say.
Interesting. If it's in and out and over pretty quickly, could you see giving Trump a pass?
I can. Kind of like how it was with the Venezuela thing, but they're saying that it's not like that, and it obviously isn't. I heard now that they want to have ground troops to secure something. I don't really know too much, just some ground troops or something. I just want to say, if that happens, I don't think I'll ever vote again in an election, just because, Donald Trump, this second term, the energy in 2024. I'm from the Bay Area. People who hated him in 2020 couldn't run fast enough to vote for him in 2024. That's how bad Biden was to them. And this is in the Bay Area. And I'm just going to say, I'm just going to feel really, really betrayed if this becomes another entanglement. I think that we have better issues to worry on, such as, at least for the young people, like student debt and everything. And yeah.
It is interesting the amount of money that is going to be spent on this military bombing. And yet they don't have money for the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. They don't have They don't have the money to help out the farmers. They don't have the money to help out the student loan. They don't have the money to help out struggling businesses. They don't have the money to sort of do what they need to do to, quote unquote, secure the border or bring in the workers they need, right? There's lots of things we don't have money for, but we do have money to bomb Iran. It is interesting.
Yeah.
Jacob, I'm short on time. Your Trump friends who voted for Trump, are they with you or, we're gone. He's gone, and I got to take a break. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Join the conversation. Call 844-2-McGraw. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, that's about going to do it for us tonight. If you want to join the show, text in to 1-844-2-McGraw, and then we will send you, you can text in hi, you can text in nothing, you can text in we love you, we hate you, text in whatever you want. But when you do, we will send you a link. You sign up on that link, and then each and every day we will send you a menu for the show of upcoming guests and everything else for that night. It's a way to sort of keep abreast of what's going on with the show and become one of the members of the show. So just text anything to 1-844-2-McGraw, and Alex will make sure you get the link on the text return, and we go from there. Hey, special thanks tonight for a number of our guests. Gayle Feldman, who wrote the book Nothing Random. Also, Kevin Book, and our guest talking about the retired Colonel Mark Cancian, who was here to talk about the running out of munitions. All of that tonight. So we thank them for spending time with us tonight. And I thank you for your phone calls and your text messages and your time. Also, thanks for listening each and every night. We're back tomorrow night with another new show. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard. He was good. McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night on Westwood One.